Afternoon everyone. We've scheduled this session to be train cams, mini cameras for use in model railways. Hope to look at a range of different styles. I suppose we ought to start by saying, why do we want to bother? And there's a number of reasons you might want to consider adding a camera to your model railway. And the first one is just to get the driver's view. In other words, we're used as modelers to be like God. We're looking down on the layout and its spread. And it's nice sometimes to actually see the layout as it would be. Does it match up to what you'd expect in real life and so on? So it's handy for that. And I've got an example of it from Keith's layout. You'll find it on our website, and it's also on the national website in the what do they call it now? The full piece. But I thought it'd be worth having a look at just one extract from it for a couple of minutes, just to kind of set the scene, as it were. I think you'll agree that it puts a whole different perspective on the layout when you see it from that point of view rather than from on high. And it might actually lead you to make some changes in your layout when you see it looks differently from what you thought it would. So that's one reason why you might want to consider. The other is you can show the layout remotely. We'll come to that a bit later, but there's no reason why you couldn't be over in India or Australia or America and looking at a layout that way. In fact, if you had radio control, somebody was saying you could just lie in your bed, watch your layout and control it from radio control without even being in the layout room. Another reason is you might want to record it. When I say that, you could record it for various purposes. For example, you might want to record it for insurance purposes, for example. Rather than to accompany a set of individual pictures, you can show they're all part of the same layout by having one of these recordings if you're ensuring your layout for an exhibition or for your home layout. Or you might want to record it just to play it back, to put it up on YouTube, let other people see it and so on. So you can make a permanent recording of your layout at that stage of its development. These first three options were to do with putting a camera in the cab. But you might want to have a camera at the trackside. For example, a couple of members I know have got large layouts in the loft, and in the loft they've got a very wide chimney breast in the middle, or not in the middle, partly towards the middle, and they can't see what's round the other side. You could put a camera around there and see what's happening. Or if you've got a particularly large layout that's designed to be run by several people and you're on your own, then it'd be nice to know exactly what's happening at the other end of the layout. Even though you can control it all from this point, it'd be nice to see exactly what's happening up there from a distance. There's also the possibility with cameras of using it for train recognition. In other words, you can use a camera to detect which particular train is passing a particular point. Use it for things like either local routing or signals or station announcements and so on that are tied to that particular local. Or why not just use it because it's fun to play with. So there's a collection of reasons why you might want to go down this route. You might want to do one or more of these. So how do we go about it? Well, what we're going to look at today is different approaches from the hardwired, in other words, camera here, length of wire, screen at the other end, and it's permanently connected, which wouldn't work of course in a local naturally, but that's a layout line side option. Having an SD card where you record the journey on a micro SD and you can play it back through various other mechanisms. Or you might want to transmit a transmitter in the local, which then sends the video back to a receiver and from there to a screen. Or the modern method is to have it transmitted straight to a browser on your computer or a browser on your mobile phone. And we'll look at each of those options now. Firstly then, hardwired, which is the simplest option. It's a bit like closed circuit television, well, very much like it in fact. And it comes in a kind of simple approach or a more complex approach. You can either use a dedicated monitor, which I'll show you, and use an old television if you've got one, or share it for Coronation Street at one point in time and your trains on another time. Or if you've got a USB output, put it straight into your computer. We'll look at all these options. There's a straightforward take out the box, plug it together and it works option. It's not designed for model railways, it's designed for, as you can see, as a reversing mechanism for your car or your truck. So the output from the camera has got its own connection, put into a cable. There's a similar connection at the other end into a monitor, and off you go. You just plug it together and it works. 7-inch screen, which is quite adequate for most purposes. Works off 12 volts, which is handy, but expensive. It does have certain advantages. It's got night vision, which is handy if it's when you'd be sitting round the back of a shaded area behind the chimney breast, for example. Works on 12 volts, which is handy. The video output for a lot of these are what they call RCA, they're composite video, which isn't the cleverest from our point of view, but there's ways around that. And importantly, from our point of view, the focal distance is as small as 30 mil up to infinite. In other words, as you go around the layout, it'll see clearly things that are quite close as well as things that are quite distant. But I say it's an expensive one. There's a much cheaper option. It's only 5-inch LCD. I can't guarantee the quality of these products. I just had a look at them on eBay. But once again, you'll see there it's got two connections, one for the power and one for the composite video coming out, and it plugs straight into the back of the monitor. So that's just plug and go. You couldn't fault that for that kind of price, I don't think. And that's a UK source. That particular one has got 4 LEDs on it for infrared detection, in other words, in darkened situations. If you want to, you can simply use an old webcam and plug the USB straight into your computer or your laptop, and then use either a bit of software like the visualizer or the Windows own camera option, and now you've got yourself a CCTV. But that means you've got to then dedicate your laptop or computer during that time, whereas the earlier option, you just leave it on your layout, and it's not particularly expensive. If you think that buying one of these is quite expensive just now, and mostly they are because of the COVID, the prices have gone right up. You can buy the camera component you find in a laptop very cheaply, as you see there. It's got the quality of a normal, what you'd expect from a laptop camera. It's got, as you'll see behind me, the camera itself is in the middle, and you've got the electronics at both ends. So it's built in to give you, in fact, a USB connection. And what you have to do with that is get a USB cable, cut one end off, and use the wires from that end to connect to the module. You'll have a couple for power, and you'll have a couple for the two USB connections, and you've got the quality you'd expect from a camera inside a laptop. I should mention, while it's fairly clear to be seen here, the camera itself, you might see little knurls on it in the way around. Many of those you can actually rotate the front part to focus, depending what the range is. Some of them are pre-focused and then they're glued or melted permanent. But if you've got the ability to turn it, you can actually focus with it. Now there we go, we've got a range of them. The only trouble with that method is, as you can see, these are a selection from different laptops, but they have different wiring. You have to make sense of which of these are the USB connections, which are the power connections. And usually you'll find something on YouTube that will talk you through either how to identify the wires or the actual wiring for the specific one you've just bought. So for only about a £5, you can make yourself your own webcam that you can use along with an old computer that you no longer use, or an old laptop or whatever, and build your own closed circuit system. And now I come to an expensive one, it was 40 odd quid, called the Pixie. I mentioned earlier the idea that of local recognition. The Pixie is an expensive option, but it's got the ability for basically similar to facial recognition. Only in this case we're going to be recognising different locos depending on the colour mix that you see. And in fact, if we look at our own website, there's been some discussion. In fact, Nick Murphy from Ireland has got something on that already. There's some work going on there, so it becomes you don't need RFID then. You can use a video to know what loco has passed a point, or which loco has arrived at a station or whatever. I did say earlier on there's a simple and more complex use for line side, This obviously is a more complex one, and for most of us we'll need to wait and see what other people come up with, but we should know that that's a possibility as a use for cameras. Right, so that's us looked at the line side ones. You'll find loads of options for recording a train's journey onto a micro SD card at different prices, at different qualities and so on, different sizes. So let's have a quick look. And again, they're relatively inexpensive. You can see from that person's hand roughly the size of it. And it would fit in obviously easily into an O gauge system, possibly into a double O, and maybe even smaller if you took it out of the case for. And all you do is you get it started, drive your loco around the layout, and then stop the recording and put the SD card into your, either you've got a USB cable on this as a direct connection, or you put it into a card reader and you've now got a recording of your journey. There's another one, in fact Keith will be showing that a bit later, or one like that, which is like a kind of sugar cube, a bit larger, it's almost an inch cubed. But that one's got built in again infrared, and it's relatively cheap too. Doesn't include the micro SD card, but that's not a problem. The problem with that one is where to or how to fit it into your system. There's one that I thought would be useful to see the specification for it. Quite small, roughly 3 centimeters by 3, relatively large for some gauges. But it's good quality, 1920 by 1080, you can't complain about the resolution. And it supports up to 32 gig, which gives you, even your largest layouts could be easily recorded on that. And again, you can see the scale of it relative to that person's hand. This is one that I recovered from a drone that can't drone anymore after a crash, and I recovered the camera from it. And you can see quite clearly there at the top we've got the camera, there's the micro SD card holder and the little board and a power pack. The connection is flexible, so that would allow you to have, for example, the board lying flat in a truck or a loco, and then just bend up the camera to look out. What does that look like in practice? Let me just show you. There, it's there. You can see it in scaled versus my hand. Pretty small really. To make it work, I just put on the power. There's a button on the side. Now it's recording. I can bend it up to whatever I want, or down, whatever I want. When I'm finished, I press the same button and I can move the micro SD card. And that's the principle that all of them adopt. There's a piece now that some of you have seen and others haven't seen, so I'll play this first and then I'll turn over to Keith to explain what camera he used and how he did it. But first we'll have a look at the video itself. hopefully you'll agree that that's a whole novel way of looking at your layout, completely different. The only thing I would suggest is don't take a lift from Keith. I noticed he drove through 2 red lights, but that aside, I think it's a very effective use of a camera in your layout. Keith, can I ask you to explain how you did it now, please?
Yes. What I'm going to do now is show you a couple of cameras. Davey alluded to the Cube camera, which I'll show you in a moment. But first of all, the camera that I used for that video. I'm actually using a third one, which I'm going to switch to now. What you're looking at now is the output from my mobile phone using DroidCam software, which will be covered later. What it is showing is the camera here, which I'll just pick up, the size of the scale, produced by a company called VEHO. It's VEHO. Movie is the model. And a lot of you may recognize it as it's a cycle helmet camera. So it's a solid piece of work. There's the lens at the top here, controls on either side because it has video and audio. And there you can see by my thumbnail, that's where the micro SD card goes. So at the end, you'll see it has a USB. But USB is used for charging the camera from a laptop, but you could also use it to turn this camera into a webcam if you wished. So let's go onto the street scene first of all. At great expense, I produced this highly detailed piece of wood with a wheel and axle set on, a bit of Velcro. And there we go. I happily can go around the tightest of angles, recording to the micro SD card, and then you just download it to the PC. Going to the next one, converted this truck to those pieces of foam out. Actually, you had to cut a section out of the truck to allow the size of the camera to go into it. Just pop the foam back in, and you'll get an idea of how it works. So that truck can be either pushed or pulled by the locomotive. The version you saw in the first video, it was actually being pulled, which is why you could see the back of the cabs. It's just a question of switching it to run, and it will just trundle around your layout until you wish to bring it to a halt. You then remove the micro SD card and put it onto a PC. Let me go to another camera, which is the Cube camera. As you'll see, it says SQ11 Mini DV camera. That is the actual make. And if you're interested in these, go to eBay and just put in the SQ11 and you'll find this. And at the moment, it's running on a set of wheels, as you see, and I'll explain how it's doing that in a minute. But also, I've got a USB connector. So it has turned this into a webcam. So if I bring the unit to there, let's say, and I go back and switch cameras back to the DroidCam, there it is. It's actually sitting on a flatbed truck. If I remove the USB camera and swing it around, there's the lens. You see that could fit on any flatbed. Also, I would reckon that will be quite easy to be accommodated on N-Gage. Remove that off again, and that's the actual size of it. Why I would recommend that as opposed to the cycle helmet camera, I just put them side by side. First of all, the cycle helmet camera, due to the elongated shape, is more difficult to attach to a moving vehicle. Secondly, the price of the movie camera has gone up incredibly high since I bought this one several years ago for about £30. I looked on the website this morning and it's more like £98 for the HD version. This particular one is $720 and you can't get it any longer. Whereas the Cube cam, the SQ11, that will record in HD, and you can buy them for as little as £7.20 on eBay. So I'd certainly go for this camera. So that said, Davey, I'd like to hand back to you.
Right, Keith, thanks a lot for that. Hope you found that interesting. I love that particular little clip. So we looked at using cars to record your journey. What are the next options we have? We can just do a simple RF transmission. Have a camera in the local, transmit through the airwaves like any other transmitter, receive the video information at a receiver and put it onto a screen. And there's various ways of doing that. And probably the oldest one is that system, where you've got up the top there, you'll see a little camera and transmitter, and then the receiver. Works at 1.2 gigahertz. I'm not sure that's entirely legal over here. That's its size. Doesn't matter for the receiver size because it's on your layout somewhere. 12 volts in, which is handy, and you can take the video out again. It's as you can see from there, it's a composite output. A bit finicky because you have to quite accurately tune that, otherwise you get pretty poor results. And the typical camera that goes with that is something like that one. You put the power in there, there's the camera, and this little aerial. I'm just trying to see if I can show you the... Hopefully you can maybe just see the little nozzles on the side of it for rotating. Fairly large. Another version is very similar except infrared. Transmitters on it. Again, you put the power on. Don't make the mistake I made. I assumed that if you put in a 9-volt battery there, it works. I assumed if I cut the cable and put a 9-volt battery here, it would work. I didn't know there was actually voltage regulation inside here, and ended up blowing the camera. And because of that, I can show you what's inside. There we go. If you take it out of its case, then that's what you get. Tiny board with the camera on it, and again your connections. So they're not particularly in favour anymore because there are better options nowadays. Still available on eBay. There's the one that's got the infrared. Fairly pricey and a bit kind of hit and miss in terms. When it works well, but you've got to be pretty well accurately tuned. I said earlier that most of these had a composite output, which isn't very handy because you may have an old television that's got a composite input, but your computers and your TV set may have. Yep. But what you want instead then is we've got the converter, which is this thing here. So what you're doing is that end is USB, and then you've got power, and then you've got your composite and perhaps your audio. or stereo if you've got stereo audio. So it converts from composite signals into a USB. So you can then use any of those devices I showed you earlier. If you'd bought a kit that had a camera like we had for the reversing cameras, for example, but you didn't want to use the little 4-inch or a 5-inch screen, you've got an old monitor you want to reuse, an old television you want to reuse, you can buy one of these. And instead of having a 5-inch screen, you've now got a 31-inch screen or whatever. So again, these are composite or RCA to USB adapters. Here's the wireless version of the one I showed you earlier, the one that had permanently wired. This is using a wireless system. So we've got a transmitter, we've got the camera, and up above it you'll see it's got two cables, one that connects to the camera, one that connects to the monitor. So one's the transmitter, one's the receiver. So that'd be handy if you didn't want to have to wire a long layout. You can put your camera at one end and have that little monitor sitting somewhere next to your control panel, for example. For £18.30. It says it's HD. I couldn't vouch for its quality. If you want a slightly larger one, you want a 5-inch version, £18.89. If you want to splash out and spend 30 quid, you can get a 7-inch version. They all work in the same principle. A camera with a built-in transmitter and a receiver that will go into the monitor. So it's a small price really I think for getting a transmitter and a monitor for 30 quid is a good deal, to be honest. More modern now is to use Wi-Fi. Everybody's got a mobile or a smartphone now almost. And you can use a Wi-Fi camera, you see in the bottom right there. What's at 2.4 gigahertz, transmits to the router in your house. And from the router you then connect to the internet, and because you're connected to the internet, it means that any other device, tablets, phones and so on, laptops, anything, can connect to that same router you've got at your house. I.e., you could, again, I could be on holiday in Australia and check what's happening back home just by going down to the internet and looking up my own IP address. So that's an option that's available to us. And there's a practical example of it. Lots of them on eBay and Banggood and so on are advertised as spy cameras. What you do with it in your own time is up to you, but in terms of model railways, you can see we can see quite handily there now. You can see the little serrations round the lens for adjusting. It's not quite the full picture. It's not quite fair, that one, because it's only showing you the camera. There's a camera and a transmitter. So from a model railway point of view, that's a more accurate picture. You'll see on the right hand side, up the top end, we've got the camera, quite a long, in fact unusually long connecting cable. That's not normal, we're usually shorter than that, into a transmitter. And the transmitter then's got an aerial, and it's also got a power connection. But that lets you put that into a loco and lets the loco talk to your router, and from there out to the outside, the whole world if you wanted to, or just your own mobile phone in your hand. So that's another option. Needs a bit more setting up though than just plugging things together. Doable. Now how cheap's that? £8. There's a kind of cube version. and it claimed as 108.0. Again, I can't vouch for its quality, but at £7.99 you might think it's worth a punt. UK source, there's no postage charges. It's the price you see there. I bought this one, and I'll show you it working in a moment. In fact, I'll let you see the size of it on my desk here. That's it. Fairly large. It's marketed really as a kind of baby monitor or a house monitor. USB, you can connect either that into your computer if you wanted to, but you can simply have it on a power pack that's giving you 5 volts. The camera inside is on a head, and that head can rotate. There's a motor inside, can rotate through 360 degrees. And again, it talks via your router. I did a recording of it that I'll play to you, because I thought you try to do things live sometimes, they don't quite work, so I'll record it so we know it's going to work. And I'll let you see it in operation. Yeah, there you can see it in operation. You can just see behind me the head. And I can move the camera from my mobile phone. So we don't have to worry about the field of vision, this one, because we can actually rotate it. So we can see as broad a sweep as we want just from the phone end. As you saw, the price for that was £11.70 plus shipping. So you're talking what, about £13. You can use it for your model railway quite easily for large layouts. Also very handy if you do go on holiday, you can have it sweep round your house while you're on holiday and check that everything's okay. There's no burst pipes. Ian Neas's smoke machine hasn't burnt the house down or whatever. So you can use it for security, or you can, and also by the way, you can take individual snapshots if you do find something wrong. You log in from abroad and you find a strange person in your house. You can click a button and take their picture. It's got other facilities, but from our point of view as a monitor of a layout, it's a small price. I thought I'd show you that one because it's so tiny. I've just taken myself out of the picture so you can see it better. Again, very small. I'm sure you could find uses for that on a loco or on a wagon or a truck for that kind of price. All includes motion detection as well as infrared. Right, moving on. I bought this from Banggood. It's called the ESP32, or it's a version called the ESP32 CAM. So you can program this with the Arduino IDE, but the camera itself plugs in. Where you see the connection here, that connection there plugs in here. And I can show you one. That's the size of it. There's the camera, which is pluggable. So you could mount that and have it looking out wherever you wanted. What you do is, I connected it up with a cable, soak it up just to make a test with it, and I'll show you the video of it in a minute. What's the 5 volts? I've got a 12 volt regulator there, and I use this because I'm connecting up. When I first power this up after I've programmed it, I can read from here through the USB cable through the Arduino's serial monitor, and it'll tell me the IP address of this. And once I've got it, I can simply call it up from any browser. The other potential advantage to it is, apart from being a camera, it is a processor. It's got some other input-output pins, so you can actually make it do other things if you wished, as well as acting as a camera. And that's how it's working. The ESP32 cam talks to your local router, and from there anything on the internet can access it with a browser, as long as they know the IP address of that camera. Right, let's have a look at it in operation. So I'm on my browser and I've typed in the address and I press enter, and I go down to where it says start the stream. There we go. I can choose to change special effects if I wanted, grayscale, sepia. Don't know why you'd want these really, but no effect. I can change brightness, contrast, saturation. Yep. I can flip the camera, can mirror the camera depending on what my needs are. Can change all kinds of levels and gains and so on. The main one is the top here. It depends how good your system is, because if I go to the highest resolution, it becomes more jerky because I can't get the full bandwidth through. If I go to something lower, it becomes more manageable. If you've got a particularly poor network, you can go right down to something like 320 by 240. Very smooth, and at least it works. And the better your system, there's VGA 640 by 480 again. In my system, pretty smooth, but you decide what you need. Right. I should mention that the 640 by 480 might be saying that looks pretty small. It's because I'm using a television set that's like, can't remember, 30 odd inch screen. So if you're using a smaller monitor, that'll be full screen you'll be looking at. So we're able to do all that for £5, £6, £7. Now that's mountable because it takes a 5 volt input. There's no reason why you couldn't have that getting picked up from your DCC power and regulated down to 5 volts to drive it, and have that fitting inside your train. Then that's one option to do it, where the ESP32 talks to your home router and from there to the world. I had thought earlier about giving you the address of the ESP32, then I thought no, because if 40 people all try to access the video at the same time, the thing's going to crash. It's not designed for multiple accesses to that extent. But there's other ways. I haven't done this bit yet, and there's a tutorial how to do it for those that are interested, where you can make it be the camera and actually be the web server itself. So you cut out the middleman, you cut out the router, and then your phone can talk directly to that camera, which is very handy for situations like, you know, a model railway show. You don't have a router sitting handy. You know, you can just use it directly. Of course, if you've no router, you've no internet connection, which means, of course, you can't access them from all over the world. But it's a whole new, different approach to it, yeah, which I'm hoping to explore shortly. And lastly for me is the turning an ordinary phone into a camera that we can access remotely. The bit of software called the Droid Cam, which is free, it says up here. It's free. There's one called Droid Cam X, which I'll show you shortly. And from memory, it's something like about a £5. So it's hardly worth not buying it. And it gives you higher resolution and it's ad free. But even at that, you can experiment with that for nothing. So you install the software on it, and let me just show you. There you go. What you're looking at is, I've pulled my own web browser here. That's the IP address for my particular phone just now, and that's the software that pulls it in. And my phone here is picking it up. So there you go. There's my setup. There's the camera that's looking down at my desk. There's one of the monitors. There's the big one I was talking about. There's this other monitor. There's the time up there. There's my green screen. There's me. You can look down on your layout. You can use it as a webcam. All on this little phone using Droid Cam. Let me take it away again. That's better. Now that's the only thing about that, from I think Keith was pointing out, was that not every phone can. It's designed mainly for Android phones. And with that, the last thing I want to look at today was using a Raspberry Pi in its camera. And for that, Chick has got something to show us. Can I pass over to you now, Chick, please?
I've actually got a couple of options. First of all, I had a GoPro. I have a GoPro. Hardly ever use it. Wonderfully robust thing, but the battery's not great on it, and they're incredibly expensive. Mine was a GoPro 4 and it cost an awful lot of money about 10 years ago. The current one's a GoPro 8 or a GoPro 9 and they're £350 plus. It's wee and it's robust as hell, and you can drop it. You can drop it out a 3-story building. They've been dropped. Parachutists have dropped them, picked them up, and they're still working. Really, really robust, but very, very expensive. The second one that occurred to me, and I've been using it, and I can't show you it because I am using it, is a thing called a borescope, which is a great big long fibre with a camera at the end. Craig, cover your eyes and ears. Used for looking inside the engine for that bit you've dropped, for going down the drain to find what's blocking the drain, or for going into a tunnel to find where it is that these things are derailing. Wonderful thing. Plug it into your camera and it cost me £7. we've got wee birds nesting in the eaves at the minute, and my borescope is currently watching them. So that if we want to watch what the birds are doing, we can dial into that. So that's why I can't show it. The third and finally is this fella here. Now, I don't know if any of you remember, but about 5 years ago, maybe more than that, the first time we ever did overhead projections up at Shawlands, we had stuff on the table and we had this overhead taking a picture of them and projecting it back up onto the screen. And this is a Raspberry Pi. Since then, I have used it instead of the GoPro for action shots. I've used it as a trail camera out in the yard to catch hedgehogs and foxes and mouses going past and stuff like that. I've used it as a security camera. I've used it for underwater photography. And I've used it for these Zoom sessions. It's basically a Raspberry Pi Zero, a 3D printed plastic enclosure, and the Raspberry Pi camera module, which lives in a little flexible PCB. The whole lot. The Raspberry Pi Zero, the initial one, cost £4.20 or £4.50. You can still buy them for £4.50. They've since moved on to the Raspberry Pi W or Pi Zero W, which has got Wi-Fi on it. So that this thing has now got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So you can get your output from HDMI direct. There's an HDMI port on the side. You can get your output to the SD card that's in it. You can output to Wi-Fi. You can output to Bluetooth. And the whole thing is about, I don't know, 10 or 20 pounds worth. Very, very robust. The back of this one is on with two little screws. If I take that off, I can put another 3D printed part that gives me a great big battery. It draws about 1/4 of an amp, so it'll last all night on one of these power packs. If I put a power pack on it, I can get overnight out of it. And the fact that we're doing this today gave me a great excuse to put this up as a 3D print of the month. So for me, the 3D print of the month will be this fella, plus a couple of options, plus where to get the parts, where to get the camera. There are 4 different camera modules. The original one was a Sony camera that's slightly better than HD. It's about, I think it's 1920 by whatever, so it's bigger than HD. They then brought out a low quality camera, which is about HD or a wee bit below it. They've got a thing called a no IR. Modern webcam has got an IR filter on it, a piece of plastic to block IR light and to make it colour match daylight. But if you put them without the colour matching film in it, you get a camera that picks up infrared light. And so that's what they call the Pi Noir, NOIR for no IR camera. You can buy one of those also. The latest one, the newest Raspberry Pi module, is a very high resolution camera with interchangeable lenses. You can put fisheyes and telephotos and all manner of happy stuff on it. And it's expensive. You're talking a couple of £100 by the time you've bought the camera module and a couple of lenses. But at the same time, you've effectively got a really good camera. This thing also will shift the image. It'll take pictures. It'll do automatic recognition. You can program it in Python. You can program it in PowerShell. There's really not an awful lot you can't do with this wee fella. It's a wee bit more expensive than some of the cheaper options that we've been talking about, but to my mind, an awful lot more flexible. So I'll be putting that up to explain as the 3D print of the month, just to give you some more details on it. And back to you, Davey.
Hey, Chick, thanks a lot for that. Very interesting. I just want to finish. We started off looking at a clip of Keith's driving through his layout, and I want to finish with this a drive through his layout, only a nighttime view, which I thought was particularly worth watching. So we'll finish with that and then we'll have questions.